Welcome back, night wanderers, to Nakora Nights. If you've ever driven long distance, you know the truth. The road gets different after midnight. The trees get darker, the radio gets quieter, and your mirrors start showing things you don't remember passing. But in Appalachia, the mountains watch you back. And the truckers who run those roads, they've seen things most people wouldn't believe, and some things they'll never speak of again. Tonight, we're diving into 10 true trucker horror stories from the Appalachian Mountains. Real encounters from drivers who swear these moments changed them forever. A figure walking along a cliff road, but never casting a shadow. A rest stop that shouldn't have been there. And a woman standing by the guardrail smiling, even though her feet weren't touching the ground. Before we roll into the darkness, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because out here on the Appalachian Highway, some roads only wake up after midnight. If you're ready to ride shotgun into the mountains, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I'm still on the road. Now, turn on your headlights, check your mirrors twice, and keep both hands on the wheel. This is 10 Untold Most Disturbing True Trucker in Appalachia Horror Stories. Let's begin. I had been running freight across the Appalachian Mountains for almost 23 years, long enough to see storms roll down the ridges like living shadows, and long enough to know that the forest at night has its own laws. I thought nothing on those winding roads could shake me anymore. Not the fog, not the steep drops, not the strange lights people talked about. But what happened on Highway 23 near the Kentucky and Virginia line still keeps my hands trembling whenever the memory creeps back. Some nights I'd bolt awake with my heart pounding, remembering that voice crackling through my CB and the thing I almost walked into. My name is Reese Holloway, and back then I wasn't even hauling cargo for a company. I had quit the long-haul scene and was running deliveries for a small logging outfit in eastern Kentucky, moving chainsaws, repair parts, and fuel drums between the camps. That night I was carrying nothing but equipment boxes, the kind nobody would ever think worth stealing. But danger doesn't always come for what's in the trailer. Sometimes it comes for you. The story began in late October, the kind of late October when the mountains were dead quiet and the sky felt like a lid pressed low over everything. It was around 2:17 a.m. and I was pushing northbound on US 23 through a stretch most drivers call Nightjaw Road because the cliffs on one side and the black forest on the other make you feel like the mountain's mouth is about to shut on you. There weren't many trucks out there that night, maybe one every 15 or 20 minutes going the opposite direction. The kind of empty where you start hearing your own pulse. I had been driving since 7 that morning, so exhaustion was pulling at my eyes. My vision was blurring at the edges, and every mile felt longer than the last. I was about 15 miles south of Red Oak Gap when a voice crackled through my CB on Channel 19. It was a woman's voice, thin, trembling, like someone trying not to sob. "Somebody, please hear me, I need help. My car stopped and I can't get the engine started. I'm alone and something is wrong, I'm scared. Anyone, please, please help me." Her voice hit me hard because she sounded about the age my niece was back then, maybe early 20s, young enough to be terrified of those woods. A girl alone on this stretch at 2 in the morning? That's a nightmare even without something chasing you. I grabbed my CB. "This is Holloway hauling north on 23, I said. "I can hear you." "Where are you, miss?" The relief in her voice made me feel relief myself. "Oh, thank God, thank you. I'm by mile marker 83 on the northbound side. My hazard lights are on. My phone died. I've been here almost an hour. I didn't think anyone would stop." Mile marker 83 was barely 6 miles ahead. I told her I'd be there in 5 or 6 minutes. She thanked me again and again, her crying cracking through the static. I felt that old instinct kick in, the one all mountain truckers are raised with. You don't leave someone stranded out here. These roads are cruel in the dark. As I got close to the marker, I slowed down and scanned the shoulder. I saw hazard lights blinking ahead, bright and sharp like they were brand new. A little sedan sat perfectly straight on the edge of the road, too straight. Not crooked like someone fighting a dying engine. Something about it made my gut tighten. There was no steam, no smoke, no smell of overheating, nothing. I eased onto the shoulder behind her car, giving plenty of space. But the longer I stared, the more uneasy I felt. The trunk was spotless. The car didn't look used enough for someone who had just been sitting helpless for an hour. I picked up my CB. "I'm behind your car," I said. "Are you okay, miss?" Her voice came back instantly, but it wasn't the same voice. The fear was gone. The crying was gone. Now she sounded almost excited. "Yes, I'm fine now that you're here. Can you come look at my engine belt? Nobody stranded at 2 in the morning in the Appalachian woods says something like that." Not with that tone. My hand froze on the wheel. Something in my chest squeezed tight. That was when I saw movement in the tree line to my right. At least 2 figures shifting between the pines, staying low, staying hidden, creeping closer. Then a third. Then maybe a fourth. Their shapes slid like shadows trying to become men. My blood went cold. This wasn't a breakdown. This was an ambush. Before I could say anything, her voice dropped again through the CB, but this time it was cold, flat, without even pretending to be human. "Come on out, driver. We know you can see us. Don't make this harder than it has to be." My whole body locked up. I slammed the truck into gear and hit the accelerator as hard as the tires could take on that shoulder. Gravel shot everywhere. The sedan's lights flashed behind me as shapes jumped out of the woods, rushing toward my truck. But I was already pulling away. Then the CB erupted with a man's voice, roaring curses so loud they distorted the speaker. Threats, promises of what they'd do to me if they caught me. I switched to channel 21 and called for any driver close by. "Holloway northbound on 23, near mile 83, I shouted. "People are trying to trap trucks. Do not stop for any car with hazards, I repeat. It's a setup." A voice came back within seconds, an older driver by the sound of him. "Copy that, Holloway. This is Timberjack rolling south about 5 miles away. I'm calling state police. Are you safe?" I told him I was clear for the moment, though my hands were shaking. I told him they had CB gear and were probably listening. Because sure enough, the angry man's voice burst through again, telling us he knew the mountain better than any trooper and we weren't getting away. Timberjack and I switched channels and kept talking until we passed each other on opposite sides of the road. 10 minutes later, state police came on the CB asking for the driver who reported the ambush. I gave them my location. They told me units were heading to the mile marker and asked me to meet them at a gas stop near Red Oak Gap. I met them at an old fuel station carved into the mountain, the kind with one pump and a buzzing sign. The troopers listened to everything I said. Then one of them told me something that twisted my stomach into a knot. This wasn't the first time. 3 other drivers had reported fake breakdowns in the last 2 months, all in the same small stretch of road. One driver had been dragged from his truck and robbed. Another had escaped. The third had vanished without a trace. His truck left abandoned 4 miles south. The group was targeting truckers because we were predictable, because we followed a code of helping, because our rigs carried money, radios, sometimes expensive tools. They knew truckers were the easiest to lure. When they reached mile marker 83 after I fled, the sedan was gone. No people, but they found tracks leading into the woods and cigarette butts where someone had been waiting. Watching. I gave my statement. Then one younger trooper pulled me aside as I walked back to my truck. "You trusted your gut," he said. "If you hadn't, you wouldn't be here. These people aren't just thieves." I tried finishing my run, but the echoes of that woman's fake crying replayed in my head. The forest felt different that night, like something was following me, watching me through the dark branches. And that was when the night turned even stranger. At the next gas stop, I walked inside to grab coffee. A teenage girl, maybe 16, passed close to me, her voice barely a whisper. "They already followed you this far. Don't go back on that highway." Then she walked away without another glance. I stood frozen, gripping the coffee so hard I almost crushed the cup. When I went back outside, I saw a woman standing 50 feet away near the exit, holding a cardboard sign. It wasn't aimed at anyone in particular, but it had one sentence on it, written in a rushed, shaking hand. "He's in your truck." I felt the world tilt under me. I spun around so fast I nearly stumbled. My truck door was closed, but the cab lights were off, and the interior looked too dark. Too still. I forced myself to walk toward it, but my pulse hammered so hard it hurt. I reached the door, stepped up, and stopped. A thin piece of paper was sticking out under the sleeper cabin door. Someone had slipped it inside when I wasn't looking. I pulled it free, my fingers cold and trembling as I opened it. "Don't look in your mirrors." My breath stopped. Just stopped. My reflection was staring in one of those mirrors. Anyone behind me could see me. Anyone inside the cab could see me. I didn't look. I forced myself not to. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the truck, to call someone, but I knew if something really was inside that sleeper, then I didn't want to see what it looked like. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it, and hit the ignition. The empty forest echoed the roar of my engine. I floored the gas without checking the mirrors once. Something thumped behind me in the sleeper, something heavy. Something that shifted its weight like it was crawling forward. I drove faster. Another thump, then another. The sleeper curtain moved in the corner of my eye, but I didn't turn. I didn't breathe. The forest blurred past. The mountains seemed to lean over the road, crowding closer, tighter, like they wanted to swallow the truck whole. Then something in the sleeper whispered, a voice I had never heard before. Low, wrong, sliding around the words like they didn't fit its mouth. "You shouldn't have left her." I slammed the brakes and the truck skidded sideways on the empty mountain road. I didn't look back. I didn't open that curtain. I threw the door open, jumped out, and ran into the cold night air. When the troopers reached me again, the truck doors were locked. They forced them open. The sleeper was empty, but the mattress was torn, and long black marks scratched across the walls, marks that looked like they didn't come from fingers, or tools, or anything that belonged in this world. They told me maybe I imagined the voice, maybe the mountain played tricks, maybe exhaustion pushed me too far, but the paper note was real. The cardboard sign was real. The teenage girl warning me was real. And sometimes, late at night when I'm hauling past Red Oak Gap, I still feel something shifting in the back of my rig, something waiting for a driver too tired to notice it climbing inside, too trusting to see the truth hunting him through the Appalachian forest. Some nights, when the wind cuts through the pines, it almost sounds like that same voice whispering from the sleeper, telling me I should have never stopped at mile marker 83. I always told myself the mountains had a voice, and if you drove through them long enough, you'd hear it whisper your name. I wish I'd never listened. My name's Howard Mercer, 46 years old, long-haul trucker for nearly 2 decades. I haul timber, steel, and whatever else they pay me to move, running routes through the Appalachian Mountains from Virginia down to Tennessee. I've always liked the solitude of the road, the winding highways that cut through mist and pine. I wasn't much of a talker, and the silence of those forest roads felt like home. But the mountains, they have a way of turning silence into something else, something alive. I started trucking after my wife passed, just me and the road. Nights blurred into weeks, and every trip I told myself I'd settle somewhere quiet one day. But I kept moving. Folks say the Appalachians are haunted, full of old stories buried under moss and fog. I didn't believe much of it, until that night. It was early October, the kind of night when the fog hangs thick and the air smells like wet pine and rust. I was hauling a load of mining equipment from Roanoke down through the back highways toward a small town called Darrington. I'd done the run before, easy miles, usually quiet. But that night, the storm rolling in from the east didn't feel right. The air was electric, heavy, and the clouds moved strange, like something alive crawling across the sky. Around 7:45 p.m., lightning started dancing along the ridge, and the road twisted tighter than I remembered. My wipers could barely keep up with the rain. I was thinking about pulling over to wait it out when I saw her. A woman standing in the middle of nowhere, drenched to the bone, her hair plastered to her face, her thumb stuck out toward the highway. I almost thought she was a shadow at first, something flickering between the headlights and the rain, but then she turned, and I saw her eyes. They caught the light just enough to look wrong, wide and glassy, desperate. I slowed down without thinking, company policy forgotten. Something about leaving her out there felt cruel. She ran up to my door shivering, her voice barely cutting through the storm. Said her car had broken down a few miles back and she'd been walking since dusk. She said her name was Grace. Small, pale, wearing jeans and a soaked flannel shirt. No bag, no coat, no umbrella. Just a woman in the storm. I told her she could ride as far as the next truck stop. She nodded fast and climbed in, dripping water all over the floor mats. She looked grateful, almost tearful, whispering thank you over and over. For the first few miles, she was quiet, just stared out the windshield as the rain beat against the glass. I tried making small talk, asked where she was headed. She said she was trying to get to a town called Bristow Hollow. I'd heard of it. Old mining place halfway down the ridge, abandoned years ago. I told her no one lived there anymore, but she didn't answer. She just stared ahead. After a while, she started asking questions. Too many questions. How long had I been driving this route? Did I drive alone? Did I ever pick up passengers? Was I carrying anything valuable? Her voice was calm, almost casual, but there was something off in the way she said it. Like she was rehearsing lines she'd said before. I brushed it off at first, told her I was tired, needed to focus on the road. But she didn't stop. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Her hands weren't shaking from cold anymore. They were steady. Too steady. And her phone, it was bone dry. Not a drop of rain on it. I remembered she said she'd been walking for over an hour. In that storm, no way that phone stayed dry. She made a call, speaking low, her head turned slightly toward the window. I caught a few words between the static and thunder. Something about a truck, equipment, and 5 miles out. My pulse started pounding. She wasn't stranded. She was planning something. I kept my eyes on the road, pretending not to notice, but every instinct screamed that I'd made a mistake. When she hung up, she gave me a smile that didn't belong on her face. It was thin, crooked, empty. Turn left at the next dirt road, she said. I told her I wasn't leaving the highway. Her hand slid into her jacket pocket, and she pulled out a small knife folding tight, maybe 5 inches. She held it low by her thigh, her voice calm as rain tapping glass. "I'm not asking," she said. That's when I realized I was trapped in my own rig. I slowed down, pretending to obey, but my mind was spinning. The next dirt road led deep into the forest. No lights, no traffic, no chance anyone would find me. I needed to do something before then. The exit sign appeared through the fog, green letters glowing in my headlights. My palms were slick on the wheel. I started turning slightly, then yanked hard the other way. The truck jolted off the asphalt and into the muddy shoulder. The tires screamed as I slammed the brakes. Grace, or whatever her name was thrown against the dash. The knife clattered to the floor. I jumped out into the rain, ran around the cab, yanked open her door. She was dazed, eyes wild, gasping like an animal. "Get out," I said, my voice hoarse. "Get the hell out." She lunged for the knife, but I grabbed her arm and dragged her out. She hit the mud hard, shrieking. The sound didn't even sound human. It was high and sharp, like metal tearing. I jumped back into the truck, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I shifted into gear and pulled back onto the road. In my mirror, she was still standing there in the rain, her arms hanging at her sides, staring straight at me. I drove until I reached a service station near the Virginia border. Called the state troopers and told them everything. They said they'd send someone to check it out. But when they called me back, they said they didn't find anyone. No woman, no footprints, no knife. Nothing but fresh tire tracks and mud. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when I climbed into my truck, there was a single wet footprint on the passenger seat. Barefoot. Small. I cleaned it off, told myself it was from the storm. But later that week, another driver I knew mentioned seeing a woman on the same stretch of road. Same description. Same storm. He said she'd disappeared when he slowed down to look. I tried to forget it. For a while, I almost did. But one night, about a month later, I was hauling a new load through the same area, just outside a town called Maple Crest. Around 4:31 a.m., someone knocked on my passenger door. I was parked at a rest area, engine off, trying to catch some sleep. The knock was soft at first, then louder. When I looked out, a man in a gray hoodie stood in the mist, rain dripping off his sleeves. His voice was muffled when he spoke. "Is this the truck from Route 17? I froze. I didn't say a word. He knocked again, same question, same tone. When I reached for my radio, he turned his head slightly like he could see me through the dark glass and smiled. Then he walked away, disappearing into the fog. I started the engine and drove until daylight. That morning, I stopped for gas. When I came back out, there was a single muddy shoe print on my dashboard, fresh, right where Grace had sat. The door had been locked. A few days later, at a diner near Charleston, a man sat across from me and asked if I was the one who drove the red rig through Darrington. I said yeah, cautiously. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "How long has she been traveling with you?" he asked. I stared at him, trying to understand. "Who?" He didn't answer. Just nodded slowly, eyes full of pity, and left without another word. That night, I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. The highway seemed narrower than before. The trees pressed closer, their branches scraping against the trailer as I passed. Every flash of lightning showed a shape in the reflection of the passenger seat. Sometimes it looked like a woman's face. Sometimes just fog. By the time I reached the summit, my radio started hissing, static mixed with faint whispers. I thought it was interference from the mountains until I heard my name, Howard. Soft, drawn out, like someone whispering from the sleeper berth behind me. I pulled over near an overlook, heart pounding. The rain had stopped, and everything was too quiet. I turned in my seat, staring into the dim light of the cab. Nothing there. I laughed under my breath, told myself I was overtired. But when I looked back out the windshield, she was standing in the road, same soaked flannel, same lifeless eyes. I blinked, and she was gone. I drove straight through the night, didn't stop until sunrise. By then, I'd convinced myself it was a trick of exhaustion, a shadow in the fog. But when I parked to unload, I noticed something under the passenger mat, a small, rusted pocket knife. The blade was still wet. Since that night, I've seen her more times than I want to admit. Sometimes on the roadside, sometimes in the mirror, always watching, always waiting. I've stopped picking up anyone, no matter how desperate they look, because I know she's still out there somewhere, walking those back roads, waiting for the next driver kind enough or foolish enough to stop. The mountains have a voice, and once you hear it whisper your name, it never forgets you. My name is Thomas Granger, and I've been a long-haul driver for nearly 15 years. I've hauled everything from household goods to frozen food, from factory parts to furniture. Most of the time, you know exactly what you're carrying because you see it loaded or you get detailed paperwork. But sometimes, you pick up what we call a sealed load. The trailer is already locked when you arrive, and you're not supposed to open it until you reach the drop point. Usually that's fine, it's just about security. But after what happened in the Appalachian Mountains 2 winters ago, I swore I'd never haul another sealed load again. It was mid-February, and the snow was deep enough to bury fence posts along the road. I'd been running short on money after a bad month, so when a private logistics company out of Knoxville offered a high-paying sealed run to a lab in West Virginia, I took it. The paperwork said the cargo was biological samples, nothing out of the ordinary for research facilities. The warehouse was out in the hills near a place called Laurel Hollow. The building looked wrong for a freight site, no company signs, no windows, and a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. When I pulled in, a guard in a heavy coat waved me through 2 security gates. He didn't talk much, just pointed toward Dock 4. The guys loading the trailer wore full hazmat suits, their faces hidden behind fog visors. They didn't look at me. I tried making a joke, said something like, "Must be nasty stuff in there," but nobody laughed. One of them handed me a clipboard with half the lines blacked out and told me to sign. I asked what exactly I'd be hauling. The supervisor, a man with a flat, tired voice, said only that it was temperature sensitive and not to open the trailer under any condition. They set the temperature control to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and gave me a number to call if anything went wrong. Before hooking up, I did my standard inspection. The trailer looked fine from the outside, except there was a faint smell, like spoiled meat hidden under bleach. I mentioned it to the supervisor, but he said it was normal for biological cargo and that the refrigeration would handle it. I didn't like that answer, but I needed the job. By the time I left Laurel Hollow, the sky was already bruising purple. The route would take me through a narrow stretch of mountain road between Boone and Marlinton, deep inside the Appalachian forest. It was a lonely drive, just me, the endless trees, and the faint hum of the reefer unit behind me. For the first few hours, everything went smooth. The road wound like a snake through ridges and shadowed valleys, the kind of place where even radio signals die. Then, sometime after 7:45 p.m., I saw something on the side of the highway. It looked like a car, burning bright orange against the snow. But as I slowed down, I realized something strange. It made no sound, no crackling, no hiss, no pop of fire. Just silent flames eating metal. I pulled to the shoulder and rolled down my window, expecting heat or smoke. There was none. The fire shimmered like a picture on glass. I stared at it for a moment, then saw movement in the tree line, something tall, shifting. My chest tightened, and I pressed the gas. The flames vanished in my mirrors like they'd never been there. About an hour later, I stopped at a lonely diner near a place called Wilkes Bend. It was one of those all-night spots where the lights flicker and the coffee tastes like metal. The cook was an old man with a white beard and cloudy eyes. He didn't ask many questions, but when he noticed the trailer on my rig, he frowned. He said, "Don't park near the woods tonight, driver." I laughed, asked him why. He just shook his head and said, "Things move out there when the snow gets quiet." That sat heavy in my mind while I ate. When I finished, I went back out to my truck. The night air was sharp, and the forest loomed dark beyond the diner's lights. As I was connecting the air hoses, I felt something tug at my pant leg. I spun around fast, expecting maybe a stray dog. There was nothing, just the long shadow of the trailer and the quiet hum of the refrigeration unit. I climbed back into the cab, heart thumping harder than it should have been. I kept driving east, heading deeper into the mountains. The snow was thicker now, and the roads narrowed until I was crawling at 20 miles an hour. The trees grew taller, bending overhead like ribs. Around 10 in the evening, I heard it for the first time, a soft thump from the trailer, then another. I thought maybe something had shifted inside, so I radioed the emergency number they'd given me. No signal. I tried again. Nothing but static. The thumping came again, sharper this time, like something hitting the inside walls. I gripped the wheel tighter and told myself it was nothing, just the load settling. But then came scratching, slow, scraping sounds, metal on metal. My chest went cold. Whatever it wasn't cargo. I decided to stop at the next rest area, but up there, rest areas are nothing more than gravel pull-offs. When I finally saw one, I pulled in and parked near a broken lamp. The air was biting, the kind of cold that burns your lungs. I stepped out with my flashlight. The smell hit me right away, rot and something sharp, like ammonia. I walked along the trailer, light shaking in my hand. The scratching was still there, from several places inside. Long, drawn-out drags like claws. Then came a sound that didn't belong in this world, a low, wet groan that rolled through the metal walls. I froze. My light flickered once, then went out. I slapped it until it came back, but the noise had stopped. The forest around me was dead silent. The smell grew stronger, spreading into the air around me. It wasn't just from the trailer anymore. I turned in a slow circle, light sweeping the trees. The snow looked untouched, no tracks, no movement. Then, behind me, something brushed the edge of the trailer hard enough to make it shake. I ran for the cab, boots slipping on the ice. I didn't look back. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the shifter. The road ahead looked endless and black, swallowed by the trees. I drove fast, faster than I should have, trying to outrun the silence pressing against the windows. For an hour, I didn't hear a thing. Then the smell came back, sweet and rotten, leaking into the cab through the vents. It clung to my clothes, crawled into my throat. I gagged, turned off the heat, rolled down the window for air, but it didn't help. Around 2:17 a.m., my eyes started to sting and I had to pull over again before I passed out. I stopped at another rest area, this one half covered in snow. A few other trucks were parked, engines idling low. I figured I'd be safe around other drivers. When I stepped out, the air hit me like knives. Then I saw it, a dark puddle spreading under the trailer doors, steaming slightly in the cold. I shined my light down and my stomach twisted. It wasn't oil or coolant. It was dark red, thick, and sticky. Blood. I stumbled back, almost slipped on the ice. My light caught movement near the next truck. A man walking toward me, old, heavy coat, cigarette glowing between his fingers. He asked if I had a problem. I said I didn't know what I was hauling, but something had gone bad. He leaned down, looked at the leaking mess, and shook his head. Said he'd been driving 30 years and never seen a shipment leak like that. Told me to call the cops right now. He let me use his satellite phone since my cell had no signal. I called the state police and told them everything. The woman on the other end told me not to open the trailer and to stay where I was. She said they'd send help immediately. When the troopers arrived, their flashing lights looked almost ghostly against the snow. Then came two unmarked trucks with men in full hazmat gear. They had me park about 100 yards away while they opened the trailer. I watched through the windshield as they pried the seal off. The moment the doors swung open, the team stepped back fast. Even from where I sat, I saw one of them stumble and fall to his knees. They worked for hours, taking samples, shining lights inside. I couldn't see what was in there, but I could hear them talking over the wind words like remains and movement and containment. Around dawn, a detective came to my cab. His face was pale, lips pressed tight. He told me I wasn't in trouble, but the cargo wasn't what I'd been told. He said they'd found animal carcasses, large ones, butchered illegally, transported without permits. He said the company was under investigation. I asked about the sounds I'd heard, the scratching, the thumping. He paused before answering. Said the inside of the trailer was covered in fresh gouges, claw marks deep enough to cut through steel. But, he said, the bodies they found were already dead before they were loaded. That didn't make sense. I asked him how that could be. He said the investigation was ongoing and walked away. They impounded the trailer and told me to stay in a motel until they cleared me. I never got paid for that haul. The company vanished, disconnected numbers, empty offices, gone overnight. I left long-haul trucking after that. I started working for a lumber transport outfit that runs only documented loads. Nothing sealed, nothing shady, but the nightmare stuck. Sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm driving through the foothills, I hear it again, scratching under the hum of the tires, faint, patient, waiting. I tell myself it's just the wind or the trailer settling. But every now and then I catch a whiff of that smell, sweet, rotten, and cold. And sometimes, I still dream of that silent fire on the side of the road burning in the snow with nothing inside it but a shape, tall and wrong, standing still and watching me pass. I never thought the quiet places in the Appalachian Mountains could swallow a person whole, but that night taught me something I never wanted to learn. I still wake up shaking when I think about what tried to keep me on that road forever. I am Lucas Ward, and I have been driving long haul for nearly 13 years, ever since I left my small hometown after my father's logging accident. My mother passed when I was young, so trucking was the only thing that let me keep moving, keep earning, keep my mind off the things I could not control. I had driven through the mountain route so many times that I knew every curve, every shine of the guardrails, every forgotten rest stop carved between the ridges. The Appalachia air always felt heavy with stories, but I never expected to become one of them. It was in early October when my company sent me on a late-night run through the Ridge Pass between Ridgefield and Merriwick, hauling furniture for a delivery outside the river towns. I started late because of a delay at the warehouse, then a sudden electrical problem made my dashboard blink whenever the truck hit a bump. By the time I reached the foothills, it was creeping toward midnight, and my fuel gauge hung just above a quarter tank. If I did not find a stop soon, I would be stranded in the cold, dark stretch of the mountains. Most stations closed their pumps early in that area, and I knew it. I kept scanning the edges of the road for any sign of a 24-hour place. My headlights cut through the thin fog curling across the asphalt, and for a while, everything was silent except for my engine struggling against the climb. Then I saw him. A man standing in the middle of the road, waving a stop sign slowly back and forth, as if warning me of danger ahead. The beam of my headlights washed over him, and I felt my breath catch. He stood alone, no lights, no cones, no machines, no signs of road work for miles. His clothes were dark and loose, and his face was in shadow, like the mountain swallowed whatever he used to be. My truck rolled to a stop only a few yards in front of him, and I leaned forward trying to make sense of the scene. He lowered the sign, pointing it toward the right, a gesture telling me to take the small side road leading into the deeper woods. My instinct screamed that something was wrong. I tried to call out, but my voice died in my throat. Without explanation, the man stepped backward into the fog and vanished, leaving the stop sign standing upright on the asphalt like it held itself. Every hair on my arms rose. I did not want to follow that road, but a mile later my low fuel light blinked alive, and I realized I had no choice but to stop somewhere soon. I turned back around and drove slowly onto the narrow path he had pointed toward, hoping I might find a small mountain station I had forgotten about. A few minutes later, a wooden sign appeared between the trees, old paint peeling off the letters that spelled Ridgecrest Haven Truck Lodge. I stared in confusion because I had never noticed it before, even after years of driving this route. But the lights ahead were bright, and I could see a fuel island between the pine trees. I pulled in cautiously, parking beside the pumps. The building looked old, almost frozen in a time before I was born, its windows glowing with warm yellow light that felt too warm for a place so deep in the woods. Every truck parked there looked ancient, polished and perfect, like they rolled straight out of a different decade. I stepped out of my cab, the cold air biting my face as I walked toward the office to prepay for fuel. Inside, the lodge looked like a snapshot of the past. Wood paneling covered the walls. Old posters advertised fuel prices so low they made me doubt my own memory, and the register on the counter looked like it belonged in a museum. A woman behind the counter smiled at me, but something felt wrong, as if her features did not match the way her face moved. She asked for cash, and when I reached into my pocket, I realized I had barely any left. She pointed toward an ATM by the far door. The machine hummed strangely as I inserted my card, and its screen flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. But it worked, handing me bills that looked older than they should have. When I returned to my truck to pump the fuel, I felt eyes on me. Not one or two sets, but many. I turned slowly. The men leaning by their trucks watched me without speaking, their faces shattered by the dim light, their clothes worn and out of place for the year I was living in. Their trucks looked even older up close. The chrome perfect, the paint untouched, the license plates faded beyond recognition. I kept my head down, finishing the pump while trying to ignore the crawling cold down my spine. When I felt hands trembling from the chill, I thought a cup of coffee might help me stay awake. I walked toward the diner attached to the building, its windows fogged from the heat inside. The moment I stepped in, the air felt too warm and too thick. Red vinyl booths lined the room, a jukebox played a soft tune from some forgotten era, and every face turned toward me like I had disturbed something sacred. I sat at the counter, listening to the quiet murmurs around me, their words strange and unsettling, talking about fuel prices too low, rules that did not exist anymore, and names of companies long gone. I kept watching the clock above the counter, noticing the hands were moving slower than they should. My coffee tasted warm but strange, like something old clung to it. When I stood to leave, a man at a nearby booth muttered something about the funny way I was dressed, and I felt the cold rush of realization. My clothes were modern. My truck was modern. I did not belong there, not in whatever year or shadow of a year this place had frozen itself inside. I rushed outside, desperate to escape. As I approached my truck, a woman crouched behind my fuel tank startled me. She was barefoot, shaking, and her clothes were torn. She begged softly for me not to call for help. Her voice trembled as she told me this place did not let people leave if they stayed too long. Her eyes kept darting toward the trees, as if someone was watching. I turned to ask her more, but the sound of footsteps made her vanish into the darkness like a ghost running for cover. Before I could climb into my cab, one of the old truckers approached me. His breath fogged the air as he circled my truck slowly, admiring every sight of it. He asked what year it was, and when I told him, he grinned in disbelief, telling me it was still 1983. I felt the ground tilt under me. I slammed my door shut and tried to start the engine. The keys were missing. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely think. I scrambled into the sleeper cabin, searching every inch, panic tightening around my ribs. When I tried to get out, the door handle jammed. The lock clicked on its own, trapping me inside the very truck I had driven for years. The cabin grew colder by the second, the windows fogged from the inside. My breath shook as shadows moved outside the glass. I heard footsteps circling me. Then something tapped the window slowly, like testing the surface between us. My mind raced. I felt around wildly until my hand brushed the spare key I kept hidden under a loose panel near the floor, something I had forgotten about until pure fear forced me to remember. I jammed it into the ignition and the engine roared alive. The lock snapped free as if the truck itself wanted me gone. I threw the truck into gear and drove out of Ridgecrest Haven like fire was chasing me. The headlights cut through the trees, and the lodge melted into the darkness behind me. As I reached the main road, the trail connecting to it vanished completely, replaced by nothing but tangled brush and broken branches. I drove the rest of the night without stopping, terrified that if I did, the mountain would pull me back to that place pretending to be safe. I told my dispatcher what happened, but he thought I was overtired. The next morning, I called the local highway office, but they said there had never been any truck lodge by that name, and no road ever split off from that part of the highway. To this day, I do not know what that place was or whether those people were alive, dead, or stuck somewhere between. But sometimes, deep in the Appalachian woods, I still see a man waving a stop sign in the dark distance, even when there is no road work for miles, and I never slow down for him again. I always thought the worst things a trucker could face were long nights, lonely miles, and weather that could tear the road out from under you, but the Appalachian Mountains changed everything for me. I had been hauling freight for over 17 years, and in that time, I learned the shape of every kind of silence. The silence before a storm. The silence after last radio chatter fades. The silence when the world feels like it is holding its breath. But I never knew the silence that follows you, step for step, voice for voice, until the night I drove the old coal routes through the Appalachia forest. I was not born into trucking. My name is Mason Hart, and before I ever put my hands on a steering wheel, I spent years working road crews and fixing busted guardrails in small mountain towns scattered across West Virginia. My father drove logging trucks until his heart gave out one winter morning on Blackout Pass. I used to think grief was the reason I chose the highway life, but the truth is, I just wanted distance. Distance from home, distance from memories, distance from the mountains that always seemed too quiet for their own good. But distance doesn't save you in the Appalachians. It folds back on you. It circles your rig like fog. It waits for you in the soft places where no one should stand. I word it like this because the hook still haunts me. I thought I knew loneliness, but I did not know fear until the night the mountains talked back. It was late November when it happened. The kind of night when the trees look like tall shadows leaning as close as they can to listen. I had picked up a load of old mining equipment from a storage yard outside Raven Valley and was supposed to haul it down toward Knoxville. The route took me along a stretch of highway that curled and twisted through miles of forest that felt untouched since the world was young. No towns, no lights, nothing but dark ridges stacked on darker ridges. The kind of place where you could scream and the hills would bury the sound instead of giving it back. The first snowflake started drifting down as I crossed into the high ridges. My CB sat on Channel 18, the usual spot for drivers heading south, and the radio hissed soft and steady like a sleeping snake. I kept it on mostly to break the quiet. It was near 7:45 p.m. when I rolled past an old weather station tower, and that was when I heard it, a voice slipping through the static like it crawled out of the wind itself. Well, look who finally made it back through here. I felt that line in the base of my spine. It carried a kind of slow grin in it, like whoever spoke knew me, knew my truck, knew my route before I touched the wheel. I looked at my mirrors, but the highway behind me was empty except for the falling snow. I pressed my mic and kept my tone calm. This is Southbound Traveler. Who am I hearing? The answer came with a rough laugh, low and sharp enough to cut the silence. You know who I am, Mason. Been watching you since you left Raven Valley. Hard to miss a red Kenworth with a crooked left fender. My hands tightened on the wheel because that detail was true. My fender had been bent weeks ago when a deer bolted across the road on a mountain turn. No one should have known that unless they had seen me up close. I checked my mirrors again, leaning forward, looking for headlights, for any sign that someone trailed me, but there was nothing. I do not think that rig of yours likes the cold tonight, Mason. Tires look tired. Engine sounds a little rough. When did you last service it? I felt a cold wave that had nothing to do with the winter. Whoever spoke was close enough or observant enough to know the sound of my engine, but the road ahead was empty, the woods thick, the ridgeline steep on both sides. Maybe someone was parked on a lookout shelf above the highway with an antenna pointed right at me. Maybe someone was tucked behind a bend with their lights off. Maybe I was already late in noticing them. I said back, "You've got the wrong guy. I don't know you, and you don't know me." Another laugh, quieter this time, almost disappointed. "Mason, you always say that. You always pretend like you don't remember. But I remember everything. I know where you came from. I know who you left behind. I know the mountains you fear most." My heart thumped hard. The voice knew more than surface details. It knew personal things, things I never said on the radio. Things I had only told a few people in my life, like how I avoided passing the stretch of road where my father died, or how I never stopped in certain towns because they reminded me of the people I couldn't face. The voice continued, drifting in and out like a whisper carried on the wind. "I know you're hauling old mining gear. I know you started late today. I know your sister still lives in Ashford Ridge, little white house with the metal roof. Cold night for her to be alone, don't you think?" My breath caught. That detail hit too close. My sister lived there. She lived alone. I never mentioned her on the radio, never said her location. The forest around me pressed tighter, trees crowding the highway like tall bodies leaning over to hear my reaction. I said into the mic, "Leave my family out of this. Stay off this channel and move on." The voice snapped back fast, loud and jagged, "No moving on. I've been waiting for you. Planning this for months. You think I follow any driver? No, I followed you. You've got debts in these mountains, Mason." A cold sweat crawled across my neck. The way he said my name felt like a hand gripping my shoulder. I tried switching channels. 17, then 19, then 21. Each time, within seconds, the voice found me again. 21, huh? That's your quiet channel. Always run there when you get scared. Predictable. You were predictable then too. Then came the part that made the night tear open. Ahead of me, maybe 100 yards down the snowy road, a shape sat in the center of the lane. A man. Head bowed, arms limp at his sides, sitting like he had just been placed there, like someone arranged him the way you arrange a warning. I slowed hard, ABS kicking in. The road was narrow. Woods pressed tight on both sides. I leaned forward, squinting through the faint snow to see him better. He didn't move, didn't lift his head, didn't react to the growl of my engine inching closer. The voice on the CB slid back in, soft and eager. "Now we're getting to the fun part." I checked my mirrors again, scanning the edges of the highway. That was when I saw them. Two more figures crouched low in the ditch beside the man in the road. Barely their shapes, just the outlines of shoulders hunched, knees bent, heads turned toward me like waiting wolves. My mouth ran dry. I locked the doors and shifted into reverse, tires crunching on iced asphalt. My rig backed up, slow, steady. The man in the road never lifted his head. The figures in the ditch didn't rise. But I knew, deep in my bones, if I had kept going forward, they would have. The voice crackled again, amused. "You see them? You see them? They see you. They've been waiting." just like me. This road has memory, Mason. These hills don't forget. I took the sharpest turn I could manage, forcing my trailer to swing wide, nearly clipping the guardrail as I retreated. My heart hammered loud enough to drown the engine. I sped until the road markers blurred. Snow thickened. The CB hissed. I thought maybe, by some miracle, the signal would fade out of range. But then the voice returned, quieter now, as if it whispered right beside my ear instead of through the speakers. Running again. You're always running. You will not escape this time. My fear turned into a deep, sick pressure in my gut. I called State Patrol on my phone with shaking hands, explaining the situation, but the dispatcher said the same thing I already expected. Without a clear description or plate, they could do nothing. And even if they sent someone, help was miles away, and the forest swallowed everything faster than any patrol car could reach me. I switched my CB off, thinking that would break whatever connection the voice had to me. But 10 minutes later, as I passed a dark overlook where the mountains dropped into a sea of black treetops, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered because fear makes you stupid. The voice said, in the same calm, controlled tone, "That won't help you either." I nearly dropped the phone. He didn't need the CB anymore. He had crossed into something worse, something more planned. As I drove deeper through the Appalachian night, paranoia sharpened everything. Every bend in the highway looked like it hid someone. Every curve of the guardrail seemed too still. And around 8:23 p.m., I noticed headlights far behind me. A black SUV. No plates visible. No change in distance. It stayed just far enough to be a shadow, but close enough to be a threat. I took an exit. The SUV took the same one. I got back on the highway. It followed, re-entering behind me. I took another exit on a sharp downhill slope. The SUV followed again, slow and steady. The voice came through my phone, laughing under its breath. "I told you I've been studying you. You're too easy to follow." Cold seeped through me like water filling a sinking boat. I pushed my rig faster, cutting down past abandoned coal chutes, past rusted rail cars left like skeletons beside the road, past silent turnouts where fog clung so thick it looked like pale hands reaching. Around 9:50 p.m., I saw a worn green sign for an old mountain rest area. It looked deserted, one flickering light near the restroom building and cracked pavement stretching under tall pines. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to pull into any place where shadows had corners, but I needed fuel. And I needed to get off the twisting highway before ice turned it into a death slide. I pulled in, slow engine rumbling. The place was empty. Then I heard it. Two voices, two men talking softly near the picnic tables on the far side of the lot. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could hear every word carried by the thin winter air. One of them said, "Mason is here now." "Told you. He'd passed through before midnight." The other replied, "You sure it's him?" "He doesn't look like much." The first voice answered, "He never did." My breath froze in my throat. They were talking about me. By name. In a place that should have been empty. The black SUV pulled into the rest area far behind me, engine humming low, lights snapping off. The voice on my phone whispered, "You walked right into it." Something snapped inside me. Fear sharpened into raw survival. I slammed my rig into gear and tore out of that rest area so fast the trailer swung wide and clipped a trash bin. I sped down the mountain road, engine screaming against the cold. My mirrors showed forest darkness swallowing the rest area behind me, but the SUV followed. And the voice followed. For the next 2 hours, I endured a kind of horror I cannot fully describe. The voice told me things no stranger should know, things about the years before I left home. About the road where my father died. About the night I swerved to avoid a deer and felt a hard thump under my wheels. A thump I convinced myself was nothing because I never saw damage, never saw signs of impact, never saw what I might have hit. The voice said, "You didn't stop because you didn't want to know. You didn't stop because the truth was easier to drive away from. You killed someone that night, Mason. And you left them there." I felt the world shift under me, like the road itself tilted. My vision blurred. I said back, voice cracking, "I never saw anyone." "I never knew," the voice answered, cold as the snow around me. "You don't get to choose who remembers." "I do." The highway curved toward the foothills near the Tennessee border, and snow fell harder, turning the world into a spinning haze of white. But I knew I couldn't keep driving blind. I called the FBI contact number I had been given months earlier during a separate incident involving stolen freight in my region. They didn't answer at first, then returned the call 20 minutes later. They told me to keep the voice talking, keep the phone line open, keep the call alive as long as possible so they could try tracing it through the mountain towers. I pushed on through the storm, letting the voice taunt me, letting it circle old wounds like a knife. I asked questions, forced him to keep speaking. And little by little, they traced him. The call pinged off a tower near an old coal access road. Agents were already in the area for unrelated surveillance. They converged there fast. I kept the voice talking about the accident, about the mountain pass, about the night that haunted him. He ranted about his nephew being killed by a trucker on a dark curve months earlier. A nephew who had been riding a bike home from his night job. The accident had been unsolved. No one had been charged. He was convinced it was me. Around midnight, the voice cut out abruptly. Silence washed over the line. Then a second voice came through, calm and official. "We have him. Stay where you are. You're safe." The black SUV that had been trailing me slowed, stopped, then reversed back up the highway as police cruisers came flashing out from a side road. They boxed the SUV in fast, weapons drawn. The driver was dragged out, screaming my name. His dashboard was stacked with radio scanners, photos of me, maps of my routes, notebooks full of dates, times, and details about my life I didn't even remember telling anyone. The mountains were quiet again, but the quiet felt wrong. After the arrest, I learned the driver's name was Leonard Pike, a local man. He had lost his nephew in a hit-and-run accident on a mountain road. Evidence at the scene showed it was a large truck, but they could never prove which one. Leonard had spent months tracking every trucker who passed that route. When he found my rig had been on that road the same night, he latched onto it like a curse. They told me I wasn't responsible for his nephew's death. They told me accidents like that often get lost in the storm. They told me I wasn't the one who hit him. But I still hear that dull thump from months before. I still wonder. I left long-haul trucking 3 months after Leonard's arrest. I took a job delivering materials for a construction yard closer to home. Less distance, less night driving, less silence that talks back. But sometimes, when I pass through a quiet patch of woods near Ashford Ridge, my radio crackles for half a second. Just a faint hiss, a whisper of static, and every time, I swear I hear my name hidden inside it. I had been driving long haul for many years, rolling through every kind of town, warehouse, and lonely stretch of America you can imagine, from crowded ports on the coast to small dusty depots hidden behind old gas stations. And every time I thought I had reached the end of strange, something new waited around the turn. My name is Daniel Cole, and before the night I drove into the Appalachian forest, I believed nothing could ever truly get inside my head again. I believed that after what happened in my early life, after losing my brother in a logging accident when I was 14, and after spending years blaming myself for not being there to pull him out, my skin had grown too thick for fear. But fear has a way of finding the cracks that life leaves behind. I had taken the job of a supply hauler for mountain towns, mostly delivering construction supplies and emergency materials to places too remote for regular carriers. The pay was good, the routes were quiet, and the solitude helped me keep my mind from drifting into places I didn't want it to go. I liked feeling useful, like I was keeping isolated communities connected to the rest of the world, and for a long time, the mountains had been kind to me. Dark, but kind. Until the night, everything changed. Back then, the work was steady, but money was tight. My niece was starting community college, and I wanted to help her with expenses, so when dispatch called me for a late pickup that paid almost double, I agreed without hesitation, even though it meant driving through the night. The load was supposed to be packaged supplies for a facility further south. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual. Routine, dispatch said. Easy run. I should have known better the moment the pickup location came across my screen. The order was listed for an isolated industrial depot deep along a service road in the Appalachian Mountains, a place I had never heard of despite years of working routes in the region. The location was only marked by a name I didn't recognize, Ridgeway Cold Storage, with coordinates instead of an address. That wasn't unheard of in mountain work, but something about it made my stomach tighten. When I asked dispatch for details, she said they didn't have any more information and that the client had requested discretion. Discretion. That word always hides something. Still, I needed the pay. I started my climb into the Appalachians as dusk settled into a cold gray shade, and by the time I reached the foothills, night had swallowed the sky so completely that even my headlights felt small. The air was cooling fast, carrying the smell of pine and wet earth, the kind of smell that should bring peace but somehow made the darkness feel heavier. The farther I drove, the more the forest pressed in, and the road seemed to fold behind me, making me feel like I was being pushed deeper into something that didn't want to be disturbed. At the first way station before the turnoff, a man in a high-reflection vest stepped out of the booth. His eyes were bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days, and he studied my face for a long moment while the scanner beeped. He walked around my truck, checked my plates, then leaned on the open window of my cab. His voice was low, almost too calm to be normal. "Who else is inside with you?" I froze. My cab was empty. I had been alone since I left the last town. "Just me," I said. He looked past me into the darkness of the sleeper berth, his gaze lingering like he expected someone to sit up out of the shadows. For a moment, he didn't blink. Then he stepped back, nodded stiffly, and waved me through with a strange urgency, like he wanted me gone, but also didn't want to watch me leave. I drove away wondering why a man would ask a question like that at a way station, but it wasn't the last strange thing that happened that night. When I reached the service road leading to the pickup location, mist had settled low across the ground, drifting like thin fingers between the tree trunks. The road narrowed into a single-lane gravel path that twisted deeper into the woods, and the forest canopy grew so thick that the sky disappeared completely. I had seen my share of lonely loading docks, but this one felt abandoned long before I even saw it. After 15 minutes on that winding path, my headlights caught the outline of a large metal building surrounded by tall weeds and sagging fence wire. The place looked forgotten, with no signs, no lights except for one faint bulb flickering above a loading door. The entire depot seemed to lean slightly as if the earth had shifted under it. It didn't look like a cold storage facility. It looked like a place that hoped no one would ever find it. I parked and stepped down from the cab. My boots pressed into soft ground, and the smell rising from the earth carried a faint sourness, like something long dead or long hidden. The only vehicles in the lot were two old work trucks coated in mud and a large freezer trailer that had frost built around its hinges. Its engine wasn't running, yet the metal looked icy cold. I walked to the office door, which hung crooked on its hinges. The inside was dim, lit by a single desk lamp that cast jittery shadows on the walls. The furniture was old and dented, metal desks from decades past. Papers were stacked in messy piles, and some pages were pinned to a board covered with strange diagrams, circles, and arrows that meant nothing to me. A thin man with trembling hands sat behind the desk, staring at me like I had arrived too early or too late. I couldn't tell which. "Name," he said in a soft voice, keeping his eyes on a clipboard. "Daniel Cole." He nodded quickly, flipping through papers, never looking directly at me. He smelled faintly of harsh chemicals, a scent sharp enough to sting my sinuses. He had me sign several documents, brushing away my questions with nervous explanations, insisting the shipment was time-sensitive, saying the load had to be sealed immediately and that I couldn't inspect it because of regulations. Regulations, my foot. I had transported everything from livestock to electronics to sensitive emergency supplies, and no legitimate facility had ever refused a simple inspection. I asked him again what I was hauling. "Process supply units," he murmured, staring down. "Nothing unusual." But his hands were shaking, and the sounds coming from behind the heavy plastic sheeting covering another doorway made my skin crawl. There was machinery grinding, but also thudding, scraping, and something else under it. Something muffled but unsettling, something like movement that wasn't mechanical at all. He told me to wait while they loaded. I stood in the small office listening to the noises behind the plastic curtain, feeling the hairs along my arms rise whenever the sounds shifted into tones I didn't recognize. Something almost like crying, or like a voice echoing from somewhere too far behind the walls. The loading took hours. Too many hours for a single trailer. The chemical smell grew stronger as workers brought crates and metal containers through the office area. They avoided my eyes, their faces pale and tired, their clothes stained with something dark, something they tried to wipe off whenever they noticed me watching. Twice the thin man at the desk took calls, whispering things that made my stomach turn. He spoke in short clipped phrases, saying things like, "Batch 5 complete," and "disposal truck arrives at dawn, and area must be sanitized before first light." None of it sounded like normal warehouse talk. I thought about walking out. I should have walked out. But the pay was too good, and my niece needed that money, so I stayed, telling myself that strange doesn't always mean dangerous. That lie didn't hold up for long. When the workers finally finished loading my trailer near 3 in the morning, I stepped outside to breathe fresh air. As I walked past the plastic sheeting, a breeze lifted the edge just enough for me to see inside the restricted area. What I saw didn't make sense at first. It looked like rows of tables under bright lights, metal trays, and what looked like tools for cutting. But then my eyes adjusted, and I understood. Those weren't animal parts on the tables. They were human. Limbs, torsos, organs, arranged in trays. People in medical gowns working silently, their faces blank like carved masks. The fluorescent lights revealed everything too clearly, too honestly, leaving no room to pretend I was seeing something else. My stomach lurched. My breath stuck in my throat. I walked out fast, trying to keep my steps steady, but inside I was crumbling. They sealed my trailer and gave me the last of the paperwork, and as soon as I drove out of sight, I pulled over and called emergency services. The dispatcher took me seriously, promised detectives would meet me near the state line, and told me not to turn back or alert anyone at the facility. I kept driving, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. Every sound in the cab made me jump. The reflection of my trailer in the mirrors felt like an accusation, like something cold watching me. The forest around me seemed alive, the trees leaning inward, the dark growing thicker the more I tried to outrun it. Hours later, at a small fuel stop deep in the mountains, I stepped down to check my tires. As I opened the trailer latch to check the seal, something caught my eye on the metal door. A bloody handprint on the inside. My trailer had been locked the entire time. I stared at that handprint as fear crawled up my spine, a new fear, the kind that whispers you are not alone even when you know you should be. I closed the latch and stumbled back into the cab, trying to breathe, trying to think. When I got back into my seat, something was lying on the cushion. A folded map. I hadn't left a map there. No one had been near my truck since I locked the doors. But the map was old, creased, and when I opened it, my exact route was highlighted in red ink from the depot all the way to my destination. Marked with little X's at places I recognized, places I hadn't stopped at, places I would pass soon. Someone had been in my cab. Someone who wanted me to see that they knew exactly where I was going. I drove faster after that, refusing to stop again until I reached the meeting point. Every bump on the road felt like footsteps behind me. Every tap of gravel on the undercarriage made me flinch. I kept glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see someone climbing out of the trailer or sitting in the sleeper berth behind me. Near the edge of the state, several unmarked vehicles and a coroner's team met me in a closed lot. They opened the trailer, and the looks on their faces told me everything. Even the seasoned officers went pale. The containers were filled with what I already knew but had hoped wasn't true. Human organs. Human remains. Harvested. Processed. Packed for transport. The investigators said I had stumbled onto a trafficking ring that had been running operations through hidden facilities in the mountains, using independent drivers to move their cargo. I had been the first driver to actually see inside one of their sites. The rest had likely delivered similar loads without ever realizing what they carried. The facility was raided. Dozens arrested, bodies found, victims identified, lives shattered. But my life didn't go back to normal after that. For months I woke up shaking, seeing those tables in my dreams, hearing the sound of machinery that wasn't supposed to be running at night, thinking about the victims whose remains I had unwittingly carried, thinking about the map left on my seat by someone who knew every turn I would take, thinking about the possibility that the person who left that map had never been caught. I quit long-haul trucking for a while, tried to stay close to home, but the mountains still call to me sometimes in the quiet moments, and I don't know if it's memory or something else echoing through the trees. Now, even when I drive short routes, I avoid isolated facilities, avoid late-night pickups, avoid anything marked with coordinates instead of addresses, because evil hides well in these hills. And every time I see a sealed trailer behind another driver, I wonder if they know what they are really hauling. I wonder if they have already seen something they shouldn't have, or if something has already seen them. I never thought the mountains could pull a man backward in time, but I learned the truth on a night I still try not to remember. I learned it while driving alone through the dark folds of the Appalachians, the kind of night when fog wraps the road like a wet sheet and the air feels heavy enough to swallow sound. That was the night everything I knew about roads, about distance, about the world itself, broke apart like wet bark under a boot. I had already lived most of my life behind the wheel. My name is Caleb Ward, and I haul freight for a small company based out of a valley town few people can even point to on a map. I am 45 now, but back when this happened, I was 37 and tired in a way that sinks deeper than bones. I grew up in a broken house on the far side of these mountains, raised by a father who died early and a mother who worked herself sick just to keep the lights on. Driving trucks became my escape, then my habit, then my home. Every mile I drove felt like distance from a past I never asked for, but the mountains never let you go for good. They wait, they watch, and sometimes they call you back. I had been running loads through Appalachia for years, long enough to know the ridges by shape and the bends by feel. I trusted the quiet stretches, the forest hollows where no radio signal ever survived, the places where the road feels like a thin thread pulled tight between old trees. I trusted them the same way a man trusts a longtime friend, believing the land could never turn on him. That was my first mistake. That night in November began like any other run, the kind that eats up hours but leaves your mind clear. I had picked up a trailer full of household goods from a warehouse outside a place called Briar Landing, planning to haul it west toward a distribution hub past the woodline counties. I had driven that path so many times I could have done it blind, and sometimes the mind drifts in ways that make the miles vanish. But that night, everything dragged slower, like the air itself was thickening. Things went wrong early. A wreck on the main highway stopped traffic for miles. A construction detour pushed us through narrow back roads not meant for heavier rigs. By the time I reached the foothills, it was close to 12, and a cold fog crawled across the forest like steam from boiling water. I could barely see 30 feet ahead. My GPS flickered, then steadied, then told me to take a right onto a road I had never once noticed in all my years passing through. I slowed the truck and leaned forward, trying to see the turn through the fog. The road was thin, cracked, broken by time. No sign, no name, no reflectors. Just a dark slit winding upward into a forest that looked older than anything around it. Something in my chest tightened. I should not take this. I should stay on the marked detour. But the GPS said it was the fastest route, and I was already hours behind, so I turned. The moment my tires rolled onto that road, something in the air shifted. The sounds changed. The world felt quieter, as if the forest was holding its breath. The pavement was rough and aged, the kind of surface that had not seen a maintenance crew in decades. I climbed higher into the mountains, the fog growing thicker, the night pressing harder against the windshield. My GPS kept glitching, first saying 20 minutes left, then 70, then 15, then 98. The numbers rolled like dice thrown by a hand I could not see. For a long stretch, there was no sign of life. No houses, no passing cars, not even the faint glow of a porch light through the trees. Just fog, forest, and the creeping feeling that I should turn around even though I no longer knew how. After what felt like an hour, a glow appeared ahead. Faint at first, then brighter, then forming shapes. It looked like a town tucked into a hollow, but the deeper I drove, the stranger it seemed. The buildings looked old, older than any I had seen in these mountains. Wooden frames, narrow windows, soft lantern lights spilling across dirt walks. People walked the streets even though it was past midnight, their clothes simple, their steps slow. The air smelled like firewood and damp earth. I thought I had stumbled onto a historical village. Maybe a festival? Maybe a film set? But nobody looked at me like I was from the same world. I eased onto the dirt road that cut through the center of the town. My truck roared like a monster among their quiet wooden homes. Lanterns swung. People stared. A few stepped back into doorways. I pulled into a small gas station with pumps so old I had only seen pictures of them in museums, each capped with glass bowls, each painted with flaking red and white paint. A man stepped out as I slowed, wearing worn boots and suspenders. His face looked kind but puzzled, and the way he studied my truck made my skin crawl. He spoke, but I will not write his exact words since you asked for no quotation marks. He greeted me and asked what kind of engine I hauled under all that steel. I told him diesel. He looked at me like I had said something impossible. When I asked what town this was, he told me Mill Ridge, a place I had never heard of. When I asked the year, he answered with confusion that it was 1914. The ground seemed to tilt under me. My chest grew tight. The fog, the road, the silence, the strange navigation. It had not been an error, not a glitch, not a trick of fog or exhaustion. Something had taken me backward. I thanked him and climbed back into the truck. My legs shook so badly I had to sit still just to breathe. I needed to leave, now. But when I turned around to take the road I had entered on, a group of people stood across it, not angry, not shouting, just blocking, their faces pale in the lantern light. An old man in a dark coat walked forward. His eyes were sharp, almost shining in the night. His voice held the cold weight of the mountains themselves. He told me I did not belong, that the road I had taken was not meant for me, that leaving was no longer possible. The only choice, he said, was to stay with them or take the other road, the road that led deeper into the mountains where time did not behave. My heartbeat thundered. I looked around. More people gathered. No one touched me, but they did not move either. I could not stay there. I had a life in the present. I had to try. I eased the truck toward the far end of town, toward a narrow road swallowed entirely by fog. The people watched me go with strange, sad expressions, as if they knew exactly what would happen to me next. The moment I left the town behind, the world warped. The road twisted unnaturally, rising sharply then dropping so fast my stomach flipped. Time on my dashboard jumped. The air felt wrong, thick, buzzing, vibrating like it carried memories not meant for me. I passed through other places. Small settlements from different times. Frontier cabins lit by candlelight. A small community with cars from the 1930s. People stepped from porches and stared, some waving, some backing away in fear. I did not stop for any of them. Because I had seen something else too, something crawling across the ground near a curve. At first I thought it was a bear, or maybe a deer struggling, but it moved in a way no animal should. It was a man hunched low, walking on all fours but twisted too fast, scuttling across the asphalt toward the trees. His limbs bent wrong, his back arching with each jolt. He lifted his head for a moment, and though I could not see his face clearly, I felt his stare deep in my chest like someone pressing thumbprints into my ribs. I floored the gas and did not look back. Farther along, something made me stop at a truck pull-off carved into the side of a ridge. My heart was pounding. I needed a moment. I climbed out to stretch my legs. Fog rolled past me like pale smoke. The forest felt alive, its silence thick. As I stood there, fuel pump in hand, something creaked behind me. A soft metallic clink. I turned slowly. A man was climbing onto the catwalk behind my cab, crawling up the metal bars with shaking hands. His clothes were wrong for any time I knew, ragged, torn. His face was thin, eyes wide with hunger or fear or both. I shouted at him to get down. He did not listen. He reached the top and crouched there staring at me. His lips trembled like he wanted to speak but had forgotten how. I stepped back into the truck and locked the door, heart slamming. I pulled forward until the catwalk jarred against a low branch, and the man dropped off and vanished into the fog like smoke carried off by wind. I drove again, hands trembling. Later, at what looked like a quiet rest stop lit by a single hanging lantern, a stranger approached my window. He carried a sealed envelope and pressed it to the glass with a shaking hand. He told me to take it and not open it until I was far from this place. His eyes kept darting over his shoulder like someone was hunting him. I took the envelope, shoved it into my jacket, and drove. I did not open it. Time stretched and cracked and looped. My clock rolled backward and forward. The fog thickened, then thinned, then swallowed everything again. My GPS was dead. My radio hissed. My headlights cut through nothing. Then, just when I feared the road would never end, modern signs appeared. Clean pavement. Fresh paint. The familiar glow of the interstate beyond a final curve. I burst onto the highway and nearly pulled to the side just to cry. I found a truck stop, parked, and called my dispatcher. He told me I had been missing for 14 hours and the GPS tracker on my truck had shown impossible locations. They had nearly sent search teams into the hollows. I tried to explain, but the words felt childish even to me. Nobody believed a thing. When I finally remembered the envelope the stranger had given me, I opened it. Inside was a scrap of old paper with 4 words written in shaky ink. Do not go back. I still drive these mountains. It is my life. But when fog rolls down the slopes or the GPS suggests a shortcut, I ignore it. I trust the main roads. I do not turn onto anything unfamiliar. And sometimes, in the far distance, beyond the tree line, I swear I see a soft lantern glow from a town that should not exist. And sometimes, when the night is deep and the fog creeps like slow water across the asphalt, I think I see a figure crawling along the shoulder, moving too fast, waiting for another lost driver to wander off the safe path. I never thought the road would turn on me, not after all the years I spent trusting every sign, every checkpoint, every uniform that told me where to stop and where to move. I guess that is what makes this hard to tell. Because even now I can still hear the wheels under me. I can still smell diesel on my clothes. And I can still feel the cold dread I learned that night in the Appalachian Mountains. And sometimes I ask myself why I survived when others did not. Before this happened, I was a simple mountain hauler carrying supplies for logging crews scattered through the Appalachia forest line. I grew up in a tiny ridge town where you learned early that life is made of struggle, timber, and long roads that never end. People used to joke that I was born behind a steering wheel because I spent my teen years helping deliver feed, lumber, and tools to broken cabins hidden deep in the hollers. By the time I turned 19, I was already taking long routes across the mountain passes, climbing narrow roads that twisted like old veins. I worked alone most of the time, and I liked it that way. The mountains felt like home, even when they were dark enough to swallow a person whole. Nothing ever scared me much, not until the night something wearing authority tried to pull me off the map. It happened last autumn in the thick part of the Appalachia forest where the highway bends toward the higher ridges, a place where fog moves like living breath and the pines crowd close enough to hide anything. I left a supply camp around noon, heading south with a flatbed full of cut timber. The work was routine, the night air was calm, and the sky above the mountains was locked in deep black, one of those nights where even the moon hides behind the peaks. I had been driving for hours when a strange scent woke me up, or maybe startled me is the better word. It punched through the sleeper cab like something rotten left too long in the heat. When I stepped down to check, I froze because there on my steps, someone had placed pieces of raw meat, fresh and red, as if torn from something moments ago. I wiped my hand across my face and tried to tell myself some animal had done it, maybe a bear or a coyote. But animals do not leave neat pieces arranged almost like an offering. I kicked them away, climbed back in, and kept moving, though something in my chest had already turned uneasy. Not even an hour later, the highway dropped into one of the lonely stretches where no homes, towns, or even old barns stood for miles. The fog rose heavy along the road, and the night pressed harder against the windshield. That was when I saw her, a woman standing on the shoulder holding a red flare. The light bled over her face, but her eyes stayed wide open, glassy and fixed on me without blinking even once. Her hair hung flat against her shoulders, and her posture looked wrong, too stiff, like she had forgotten how to move. As I passed, she twisted her head in a way that did not feel human. The flare burned bright behind me, then vanished into the dark as if swallowed whole. My skin crawled, but I did not stop. You learn in the mountains that some things you leave alone, because some things in the woods are not always lost people. Fog thickened around the mountain bend, and soon the forest closed in so tight the branches almost scraped the trailer. I was maybe 20 miles from the next service stop when green reflective signs appeared through the mist. Mandatory inspection station ahead. All commercial vehicles must pull in. I stared at the sign for a full second, confused. I had driven this route more times than I could count, and no inspection stop had ever been placed this deep in the wilderness. But the signs kept coming, structured and official, with arrows pointing off the highway toward a clearing cut into the hillside. The station itself glowed under floodlights, a small building, a scale pad, and 2 trucks already parked inside the lanes. Men moved around wearing jackets that looked like mountain enforcement uniforms, though something about the patches seemed unfamiliar. I eased onto the scale, trying to settle the pounding in my chest. An officer stepped toward my cab holding a clipboard and told me to park in the inspection bay and bring my registration and logs. Everything about his words sounded routine, but his eyes kept drifting past me toward the forest, like he was listening to something out in the dark. The building they led me into was a plain trailer set on cinder blocks, with harsh lights that buzzed like dying insects. Inside, several men in uniforms gathered around a table, but their behavior felt off. They did not check my logs, not properly. They did not ask about my hours or the truck's safety. They asked about my timber load, the value, the pickup point, the delivery point. One man wanted to know if I often traveled alone, which days I preferred to run, and whether I used the lower roads or stayed on the high ridge routes. The questions felt wrong. Real officers asked standard things, never personal route habits. The floor under my boots felt colder than it should, and a thick dread curled around my gut. I stood there answering questions I did not understand while the men outside spent far too long picking through my truck. Every few minutes I would hear a metallic clatter or the scrape of a tool against the trailer. They dug through my compartments, swept through my sleeper berth, pulled open my storage bins, and even measured the timber like they were searching for something valuable buried inside. Their whispers drifted through the thin trailer walls, sharp and secretive, not the clear radio calls and methodical checks real officers use. At one point I walked outside to breathe, and that was when the next strange thing hit me. While I used the rest stop bathroom behind the trailer, I heard something scraping the passenger door of my truck. Slow, long scratches like fingernails dragging metal. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would crack. When I peeked around the corner, no one was near the cab, but fresh marks streaked down the paint in crooked lines. I wiped my palms on my jeans and told myself to stay calm, but my breath came fast and shaky. Then I heard 2 officers speaking behind the building. Their voices were low and cold. They talked about clearing the load, preparing for transfer, and the usual buyers waiting across the state line. My stomach dropped because those were not inspection terms, those were theft terms. And then came the line that felt like ice sliding under my skin. One of them said the drivers had to be handled cleanly this month, that the woods here swallowed people easily, and no one ever looked too far up the ridge. I looked down the slope where the forest pressed thick and quiet. It hit me that they were not inspecting my truck. They were planning to take it, and after that, take me. I had heard stories about hijackers in the deep Appalachian roads, but never did I imagine someone would build a fake station just to trap drivers. I forced my voice steady, walked back to the nearest officer and told him I felt sick and needed a restroom again. He pointed behind the trailer without looking at me twice. The moment I stepped around the corner, I headed deeper behind the slope, and that was when everything inside me froze. Behind the inspection trailer sat 3 trucks with out-of-state plates, all parked crooked, abandoned like their drivers left in a hurry. One had the windshield cracked inward like someone had slammed something heavy into it. Another had a smear of something dark on its bumper. Tarps covered the ground near them with stains that looked too much like dried blood. A backhoe waited beside the trees, its bucket muddy even though it had not rained for days. A row of radio equipment sat on a fold-out table with devices that looked like signal blockers. I knew then that these men were not pretending to be authority for small theft. They were running a full hunting operation, and I was their next prey. My hands shook as I ran back to my truck. I tried my phone again, but the signal was dead. The CB radio picked up nothing but a soft hum, like something was heavy in the air, blocking every transmission. My chest tightened, my breaths came short, and fear wrapped around me like chains. I climbed into the cab, turned the engine, and prayed the sound would not draw attention. The engine fired on the first try, a miracle under that kind of pressure. I looked in every mirror and saw no one running toward me. I pushed the clutch down, grabbed the wheel, and went straight through the fence at the back of the lot. Metal tore like screaming tin. My trailer bounced hard, sparks flying as I tore into the dark forest. Voices shouted behind me, headlights flared in the mirrors. Engines roared to life. I drove blind through undergrowth and rocks, gripping the wheel so tight my fingers went numb. The truck lurched and slammed over broken ground, and branches whipped against the cab like claws. I kept pushing, following an old mining road someone once told me about, a narrow cut through thick pines that barely fit a truck. Adrenaline burned inside me. Every bump felt like the wheels would snap. Every shadow felt alive. The forest seemed to close around me, squeezing tighter as if it wanted to keep me. Behind me, the headlights faded once, then reappeared, then faded again until the forest swallowed everything. After what felt like forever, the mining road spit me onto the main southbound highway. My chest felt like it might burst. The first vehicle I flagged down was a mountain patrol cruiser, and I stumbled out of my truck, half crying, half shaking. I told the officer everything in a rush, but when law enforcement reached the location where the fake station stood, everything was gone. Not a single trailer, not a single tool, not even the lights. The only signs were the torn fence and tire marks that led into the woods. It was as if the station had never existed at all, but they found the 3 abandoned trucks hidden in a ravine farther down the ridge. All their drivers were missing, officially missing for months. Investigators told me later they had been tracking a group operating fake checkpoints all across the mountain routes. They used portable buildings, fake lights, and uniforms bought from retired officers or stolen from storage facilities. They stole cargo worth millions, and they eliminated anyone who could identify them. They moved the whole operation on short notice, vanishing into the woods like ghosts. And I did not sleep right for months because thinking about how close I came to disappearing into those same dark trees still makes my skin crawl. Since then, I changed everything. I carry a satellite phone so no mountain jammer can touch it. I study every official checkpoint on my maps. And if a station appears where it should not be, I drive past and report it. I learn to trust my instincts because out here, in the cold shadow of the Appalachian forest, not every uniform is real, and not every sign on the highway wants to keep you safe. Sometimes when I run that ridge route, I still see the place where I broke through the fence. I still feel the forest watching me. And on some nights, I swear I smell raw meat again, fresh on my steps, as if something out there remembers me and wonders why I escaped when others did not. "43 years old, long-haul driver for a small freight company. I grew up with engines and dust, raised by a father who hauled machines for a mining company, a man who kept every fear tucked deep inside until it ate him alive. I guess that part didn't skip me. I have lived more in the dark miles between towns than I ever lived in any home, and when my brother died 3 winters back, Those roads became the only place I could still breathe. I had no family left, no one waiting at the other end of any route, so I took more night shifts than I should have, letting the hum of diesel drown out everything else. I did not know the mountains would swallow me that night. I did not know the job would drag me into a place where the tree lines leaned like listening figures and where the rocks held old names no one spoke anymore. I only knew my dispatcher said there was a fast drop in the high ridge region near Mason Hollow, a locked-in delivery of fencing material for a private landowner, some urgent request about blocking off an old trail that strayed too close to ancestral ground. I didn't agree to the job, but the contract had my name and signature stamped across it like someone had traced my hand. Work had been slow, and my truck loan sat like a ticking bomb on my shoulders, so I rolled with it. Bad choice or not, the highway ahead felt easier than staying still. The climb into the ridge was quiet, except for the wind scraping along the cab, and each mile brought thicker fog, the kind that seemed to rise off the dirt instead of fall from the sky. By the time I reached the switchback before Mason Hollow, the air tasted sharp, like cold metal held against your tongue. I parked my rig on a turnout beside a rust-eaten sign pointing toward a forestry access road, and right then, a semi coming downhill flashed a board in its window as it roared past. 4 words burned in red paint across the metal sheet. "Do not stop tonight." My hands tightened around the wheel. No driver does that unless something real bad waits up ahead. I tried calling the number my dispatcher had given me, but the connection died before the first ring. The mountains ate the signal whole. I should have turned around. I wish I had. I rolled on anyway, following the dirt road deeper until the map said I was close to the drop point. The trees on both sides grew too close, leaning forward over the path like they were trying to listen to the engine. The air felt heavier there, too clean but somehow rotten underneath. When I finally stopped, it was near a clearing with an old shack slumped against the slope, its roof bent, its door hanging loose like a mouth grimacing. I stepped out into the cold air and felt the quiet pressing on me. Then the thud hit the back of my trailer. I spun so fast I nearly slipped in the dirt, raising my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing moved. No prints, no branches shifting, just the stillness of a place that wasn't empty even if nothing showed itself. I forced myself to breathe and tried to shake it off, chalking it up to settling cargo or maybe a falling branch, though nothing had fallen. I walked the perimeter once, saw nothing, then climbed back into the cab for the night, locking the doors and forcing down a sense of unease that kept snaking through my spine. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it shattered with a sharp scrape beneath me. I shot upright in the dark cab, heart hammering as I heard a clawing sound under the floorboard. Something was moving beneath the truck, slow, deliberate, scratching the metal every few seconds like it was writing in some code I wasn't meant to understand. I flicked the cab light on and leaned down toward the vent by my footwell, 2 pale hands pressed up against the slats from below. I jerked back so hard my head hit the window. I unlocked the door, dropped into the cold air, and circled the rig in wide steps, shining the light under the body. Nothing. No hands. No tracks. Just dirt pressed flat like someone had been lying there moments before. I didn't sleep after that. When daylight finally cracked through the fog, I rolled through the last mile toward the drop site, a narrow area where the forest opened into a strange clearing. I unloaded the fencing pallets as instructed, though nothing about this place looked right. On the eastern tree line, someone had carved symbols into the trunks, shapes like diamonds sliced open down the center, bleeding lines cut deep into the bark. Every third tree wore one, marking a path heading downhill toward a valley that looked too dark for the time of morning. As I stepped back toward my truck, I saw her. A woman stood 30 yards out, dressed in a loose red dress that looked soaked at the hem, her bare feet blackened with dirt. Her head remained still, her eyes fixed on me as if she had been waiting. I lifted a hand trying to ask if she needed help, but the moment I took a step, she twisted her body low and crawled into the brush on all fours, folding into the shadows like a spider returning to its web. I couldn't shake it. Something was deeply wrong here. I forced myself to finish the drop, though my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I climbed back into my rig and tried starting the engine, but when I reached for my keys, they were gone, my gut hollowed out. I ran a quick search of the cab, the steps, the dirt, everywhere, but they had vanished. Then I saw my tires. All 8 of them were slit in perfect straight lines, clean cuts like someone used a surgical blade. The forest watched me from every angle, and that metallic taste in the wind crawled up my throat. I stayed one more night because I had no choice. I sealed the doors, wedged a wrench against the handle, and wrapped myself tight in my sleeping bag, trying to pretend the dart didn't feel like it was breathing with me. At 2:17 a.m., the scratching returned. It moved inside the walls this time, pacing slow around the metal frame of the sleeper, tapping lightly as if memorizing the shape of my truck. I whispered for it to stop, not even sure why I spoke, and 3 seconds later the same whisper came back, matching my tone, matching my breath, repeating my words slower, like the walls themselves were learning my voice piece by piece. When dawn crept in, I grabbed what I could carry and started down the mountain on foot. The road felt endless, curling through trees that seemed too tall, too old, their roots shifting under the soil like something living deeper inside them. I reached a wide turn in the road 30 minutes later and saw smoke lifting through the trees. My chest tightened when I realized where it rose from. My truck was gone, burned down to its metal ribs. The heat still pulsed from the frame, as if the fire had only died moments ago. Beside it, laid neatly in the ash, were 5 small pairs of children's shoes, charred and cracked, arranged heel to toe in a perfect line. My knees buckled. I backed away until bark scraped my shoulders. Later that afternoon, stumbling half-dazed along the forest road, I found a small old grocery and fuel stop near a split in the trail. A local man with a gray beard and worn cap stepped out, eyeing me like he already knew where I had been. He introduced himself as Harper Crow, the owner, and when I told him I had been up near Mason Hollow, he went pale and told me to stay far from the deep woods past that broken shack. He said no soil grew there, no birds dared land in that bowl-shaped valley, not since the mother who lost her mind drowned her 4 children there 28 years ago, trying to save their souls from something she swore lived under the mountain floor. They said she still walked the hollow, or something that borrowed her skin still did. I didn't want to hear more. I didn't want any part of whatever history lived here, but it followed me anyway. When I made my way back toward the clearing to gather my remaining tools, a rabbit hung nailed to a fence post welcomed me, its belly torn open and a small child's pacifier shoved deep into its mouth. Beyond it lay 6 freshly dug rectangles in the soil, all perfectly shaped, each just deep enough for a body. My breathing turned thin, my vision shaking. That night, when I checked my emergency satellite phone, I found a piece of paper tucked under it. It was torn from an old regional library index, the section listing missing children from the Appalachian foothills. Someone had added my name in red ink. On the back, 3 words bled through the page: "Blood remembers you." I don't know what cracked inside me, but something did, because after that, everything blurred. One moment I was following a sound, a faint voice echoing from the valley, a wet and broken cry calling for help. The next, I was inside a tunnel carved into the mountain's base, a collapsed coal shaft dripping with cold water. Deeper in, I found them. 4 bodies hung upside down, suspended by wire hooks from the ceiling, symbols carved along their spines that matched the cuts on the trees. Their mouths were forced open with twisted metal, frozen in silent screams. One wore a forestry badge, the name scratched out with something sharp. Rumor said a worker once went missing in these woods, a man obsessed with the dark veins of the mountain, a man who moved underground until the mine swallowed him and made him part of whatever pulsed in its deepest chambers. I remember turning, running, slipping on cold stone. I remember a shadow moving behind me. I remember nothing after that. When I woke, I was lying in a shallow creek 30 miles away, my legs covered in leeches and my gear gone. My journal, the one I kept every mile in, had vanished. My body ached like something had dragged me across half the ridge. Back home, I tried to forget. I tried to bury it under miles of highway and the rumble of diesel, but the mountains didn't leave me. I had my blood tested after the nightmares began. The results came back with anomalies, markers found mostly among old Appalachian families native to that exact region. like I was related to someone I had never known, like the mountain had marked me. Last week, bones were uncovered in the burned ruins of a farmhouse near Mason Hollow, children's bones, arranged in a ritual circle. And 2 nights ago, I found carvings behind my bathroom mirror, faint scratches forming the same split diamond symbol that bled through the bark of the trees. Every night now, at 2:13 a.m., the walls in my apartment stir with a soft skittering, like something small learning how to walk upright. I try not to listen. I try not to breathe. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I notice my reflection blinking a second too late. I know the mountains will call me back, and next time, I don't think I will leave.